So as we continue here, if we take another look at the drawing, I want to draw your attention to what would be the primary features. Okay, and I would start first with setting up some reference lines. So if we take a look at the primary feature as being this concentric set of circles here, and then we have our secondary features along with our arms, and then finally our filleting. Okay, just pay attention to the dimensions that are shown there. And let's go ahead and start with setting the reference lines for these angular features. So to begin with, again, I'm going to switch over to the Home tab, use my pull down here to select the center line layer. Okay, using construction line, I'm going to set up first a vertical construction line to locate the primary feature, and then I'm going to use some angular construction lines to set up those secondary features that you can see here. We got 30 degrees from the vertical, which is also 60 degrees from the horizontal. And if we look at this one here, 45 degrees from the vertical, we have 135 degrees from horizontal. Let's set those up first. So if I come back again, use construction line, this time I'll do a horizontal, and I'll place that the starting point of the previous one, and then I'll go back into construction line. This time I'll use A for angular, and I'll set this to 60 degrees. Place that at the start point. Hit enter to escape the command, and I'll go right back into the same command. Once again, use the option A for angular, and this time I'll input 135. So there are my angular construction lines. The next one I want to put in is going to be the radius of 6 to locate those two other sets of concentric circles. So I can start with my circle command in the draw panel here. You can see we have center radius as an option. I'll go ahead and start from that same starting point there, and then just type in 6 for the radius there. So now you can see here's our drawing layout. All right, we've got our reference lines, so now we can continue with developing our drawing geometry. So I'll draw your attention to these 3 concentric circles. We do have a pair here of equal radius and diameter, and then we have the one down here. I'm going to use the copy selection command to develop these sets of circles here, and then I'll show you using properties how we can modify our entities as well. So we're going to start down here at the bottom. I'm going to switch layers first and switch to the object layer. I'm going to select circle, and we're going to start first with the outer circle of radius 125. So we'll start there as the center, type in 125, and then now for the concentric circle, we've got one set that is 125 diameter, and the other ones are going to be 1 inch. So I'll show you how we'll deal with that in just a second. So we'll start with the second circle, make sure it's concentric there. And here, instead of radius, we'll type D for diameter, and then punch in the value, 125. So there we go, right? Now I'm going to create the other 2 sets simply by crossing selection, the 2, right-click, and we'll use copy selection. Now our base point is going to be the start point there, and then we're going to come up here to the intersections. And then now we can adjust the diameter of these 2 to the correct size using our properties. So I've selected them, and right-click, use properties here, and look into the area for geometry. There you'll see the diameter value, which we're going to change to 1.00, and then enter. So you can see they stay in the same spot, the same intersection, but now they're a different size. Great. So we got our primary features in there. Now let's start developing the remaining secondary features. And we've got all these tangent arcs and tangent lines. Let's start first with the tangent line. Now over here, I'm going to continue on the object layer. I'm going to use line, And to start tangency, I'm going to use Shift right click and select tangent. This will be good for this one instance. I want to make sure I'm in the right quadrant area here to start with, and just click. And then now we'll again use Shift right click to select tangent as the snap mode. Again, we want to think about what quadrant area we're selecting in, and you can see there AutoCAD correctly establishes the tangent. Now I'll go ahead and use offset, so just type O, enter, and then input the value there, and then we'll be able to select this tangent edge and offset it towards the inside. Now before I start the cleanup, let's go ahead and do all the other tangent arcs and offsets starting on this side. So here we have a radius of 250. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. Let's just start first with circle tangent tangent radius. So I first have to select the first tangent circle and then the second tangent circle, and then now I can input the radius, and this should be 250, and then enter, and you can see AutoCAD draws in that tangent circle. But now what we should do is actually trim the circle, and we could use the trim command, first selecting the two contact circles there, then hit enter, and we could trim off the excess on this side. Once again, we could use O for offset, and then offset 0.75. You can see there it's still the current default value, so just enter to accept, select the entity, and offset to the correct side. Once again, let's do this top tangent arc here using these two circles, and we could use the same circle tangent tangent radius option here. This time I want to think about using the outer quadrants and then typing in the 6-inch radius. Oh, sorry, the 725 radius. All right, we got that. Now before I offset, I'm going to trim this back. So I'll enter the trim command and select our two cutting circles there. Trim off the excess. Now we can offset. Once again, you can see there the default value, 0.75, and offset that arc towards the inside. Now we're ready to start cleaning up. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do here is I also like to make sure we can isolate information to make it easier, focus our attention. We could do this a variety of ways. One could be using the freeze tool here, and just by selecting the center line, I can freeze that. Or, let me undo. I could also use these other tools here to isolate information. Sorry, it's up here. Here's the isolate and unisolate tools here. So if I wanted to isolate information, I could just select the objects that I want to isolate. Okay, select the objects I want to isolate, such as the object line here, and then hit enter. What this does is it turns off all the other layers, and to restore it, I need to unisolate. So either one works, just know which status you're changing there. I'm just going to use freeze for the moment. Okay, now it's easier just to focus our attention. I'm going to use the trim command now in a special way. I'm going to enter the command trim, and I'll use two enters. So enter to activate the command, and then you can see there in the carets. If I enter again, it's going to select all, meaning all intersections are cutting edges. And the way this works is that I don't have to select any cutting edges, but anywhere I trim, it's going to use an intersection to help me do that. Right, so you can see here I need to trim this part before I can trim that part. And I'll go around. So then I can come back here to open up those circles. Okay, and now lastly, I just need to input the typical fillet radiuses, or radii, which is 0.5. So to do that, let's take a look at the fillet command here. I'm going to activate the fillet command, take a look at the command line there, and first thing we want to do is set the radius. So type R and then enter. We'll establish the radius as 0.5, enter. But since we're going to do multiple fillets, we want to go ahead and use M for multiple and then enter. This way we could just continue creating the fillet radii just by selecting each edge. That way we don't have to stop and re-enter the command. Alright, looks like we got all our line work in there. If we take a look, now what we need to do is, as we complete the design, we need to use annotations, right? So this is where we could reuse our construction lines or for our center line references, trim them back, and then add some dimensions and notes to complete our annotation. So let's take a look at that. So I can turn back on my center lines. Okay. Now to reuse these center lines, but to cut them back, I can use part of the existing geometry as cutting edges and then remove that temporary geometry. And this is what I mean. I'll go back to offset and make a consistent offset of about 1/4 of an inch. Now take a look at all the reference lines that I want to trim away, and you can see here I can use the geometry that's there to create an offset, which will later be a trimming edge that I can use. Okay, so when I hit enter, now I can use trim, and this time I'll make sure that I select all of those offset lines to act as my cutting edges, and then enter. Now I can go around cutting back those reference lines. Okay. And actually what I'm going to do down here is use this to trim back here. And then I can get rid of all of those temporary offsets. Okay? So I have nice, clean, concise, consistent reference lines. Alright, now I'm ready to do some annotations. Now, I can do the annotations a number of ways, but I want to draw your attention here to the annotation scale set 1 to 2. You can see my filtering is on, and so now I want to switch over to my dims layer. Okay, I'm going to start with my angular dimensions. So I'm going to come over here to annotate, make sure I have my current mechanical dimension style there selected, and I'm going to use angular. I'm going to select the reference lines here to establish my angular dimension. Don't place it on the object, and don't place it too close to the object or too far away, but some distance where you can actually see the gap from where you're measuring your angles. So once again here, I'll want to select the reference lines, and then I can line it up with my previous dimension there. Okay. As I continue here, I can add my radius dimensions for this outer radius here, and notice if things get too crowded here, you can always adjust simply by selecting the dimension line and pulling that away, and then also using it to align with other dimensions, just like that. All right, now if we're going to customize our dimensions, let's say for this radius right here, I'm going to use radius again, place the dimension, and here we need to show the typical indication. So what I want to do is use ED, think of edit dimension for example, enter, and select the dimension text. What's highlighted in purple there is the associative dimension value. That changes automatically. But I'm using the arrows on my keyboard here, and then the carriage return, the enter there, to type in TYP. Now this is text that will stay with that dimension, okay, and why you shouldn't just use single text or multi-line text. Okay, if you ever need to adjust this, the positioning, that custom text will move along with it. Alright, let's go ahead and input all the other dimensions there for the radius here. And then we have a diameter dimension over here. And then we have our offset dimension. Now this particular dimension here is not horizontal or vertical. It's an aligned dimension. Okay, so we're not going to use the linear, we're going to use a line dimension for this one. And an easy way to do this so we can get the right dimension here is pick a snap mode here And then to get the actual or true length here, I'm going to use Shift right click and use perpendicular, right? We want to get the perpendicular dimension here. Snap there, and then you can see we can place our dimension. So if the text doesn't show up where we want it, we can always select the text, and notice if we go over the grip, this is how we edit with grips. Then we can select our option here to move the text alone or move the text with leader, for example, right? To place it in a much easier place to read. Okay? And then finally, we've got our diameter dimension over here. And again, we have a little custom text. So here I'm going to type ED, enter, select the dimension text. I'm going to use my arrows to start at the beginning of that and just type in 2x. And there we go. Now what you'll notice is the drawing itself should only show 2 decimal places. So in order to adjust that, if I go over here to the Dimension Style Manager, select the dimension style that I'm working with, and modify, we'll come over here to Primary Units, and you can see, even though I have 3 decimal places for precision, I only want to show 2 in the dimensions. When I click OK, because all of the dimensions are using the same style, you can see that they've all updated correctly. So upon review, I want to make sure that I have all of my drawing information, my reference lines, and my annotations. Now we're ready to do our paper space presentation.